I'm Yinka, and this is The Hurt Locker, a podcast where we open a door into men's mental health. Come and go.
About things you never thought you would talk about, like, for example, what happened with breaking with my mum.
It was heavy subject matter.
I was frightened in my own home. I didn't feel safe in my own home, you know?
That image is etched in my brain. And viscerally, I can actually feel that fear. And you brought me into your space.
Everything you're doing, it seems, is causing more crisis.
You're listening to The Hurt Locker, a podcast which opens the door to men's mental health. Tonight we have returning back to our podcast is David Ephgrave. David, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back.
It's good to have you here again. And I'm smiling to myself because you've returned back. So it couldn't have been too much of an excruciating experience.
Unless I'm a glutton for punishment, I suppose. But no, not at all.
There's a part of us that's always a glutton for punishments. But how have you been since we last met up?
Yeah, not too bad. It's probably been about 5 or 6 months, isn't it, I think?
It has, indeed.
Yeah. Not. I mean, I know not too bad is the sort of standard answer. But yeah, but I've been all right.
So what do you mean then with my therapist hat on by not too bad?
Oh, I don't know. It was funny because obviously like last time we spoke, we were talking about my dad particularly and the show I wrote about my dad. And then about a week or so later, I did that show, what was sort of supposed to be for the last time, at my own comedy club. And there were various like huge tech issues like 5 minutes before we started and stuff. So I ended up having like probably the worst experience of that show just because my brain was thrown. And so I was doing it in all manner of the wrong order. Well, you know, and it was just, and because also when you run a comedy club, you've got all the admin and I'm dealing with the other acts and stuff. And it was just, so that was a bit of a horrible experience. And so I've been sort of put myself back together after that, really, which sounds a bit dramatic, but yeah, it just shows you sometimes, you know, you sometimes feel like you're only as good as your last gig, I suppose. And, you know, I mean, I've had some since, but yeah, so that slowed me down a bit. But other than that, I think I'm all right.
How's the gigging been for you?
Yeah, good. Because my comedy club, which has been running for 16 years now, mostly comedy, it briefly closed after sort of COVID and stuff, and then looked like it had closed for good. So the last sort of, well, since before I spoke to you really, but the last sort of 9 months or so has been opening that up again and getting that back up on its feet. So that's the most of the gigging I've been doing really, is my own club, which I host and stuff. But yeah, it's going really well, really, really well. We're lucky with it. It's, every show's sold out so far, which is brilliant. Excellent.
And as an aside, and for those people who haven't listened to our first session, some of the feedback that I've had of people has been really, really positive in the sense that people have said it resonated with them and in terms of how they felt. And you know what, for me, even if it just impacts and supports one individual, that's a tick and a job done for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Not at all. Thanks for having me.
So this is always open-ended. There's no script there. I'm led by you very much. So where should we go on our little journey today?
I don't know, really. I'm conscious of what happens if I contradict my previous episode or, you know, well, my stories don't match up.
You're just human. That's okay.
I don't mind, really. Like, no, I'll let you lead the way.
That's very generous of you. That's very generous. One of the things I'm mindful of now, we're coming into the beginning, we're midway through April now. And the past couple of days, the weather's been really good. And it's interesting how people's moods shift and change for more of a positiveness when the sun is shining a little bit more.
Definitely, yeah.
Does that impact you? The weather, seasonals?
Yeah, it does. I think, you know, it's the standard thing of it being lighter in the evenings and stuff makes a real difference. And it's funny though, isn't it? Because if you're quite a depressive person, which I am, and that's sort of on record, it depends on what your mood is sometimes, how you face that. Because on certain occasions when it's been a really lovely day, if you're feeling really, really shit, you're like, oh, fucking, even the world's looking brilliant today. So you can turn a positive into a negative. Do you know what I mean? So, yeah. But for the most part, no, it does definitely make me feel better, I would say.
And in terms of your show, comedy, etc., the club,
yeah,
will you have a break, or is this a busy season now, leading right up to, say, the summer, Edinburgh, Fringe, etc., etc.?
Yeah, it's monthly in Hitchin. That's where the sort of the home base is for the club. But what we're doing is we're looking at reopening again in other places. So we've got a venue in St Albans that we did before. So we're sort of at the point of looking at it growing at the moment. And yeah, we break for Edinburgh because basically all the comics are up in Edinburgh, so there's no point in running them. But it's a bit of I don't know, I find myself doing it. I mean, I'm really sort of proud of it and I do really enjoy it. But there's the but. Because I run it and I host it and I book for it, and I do that with someone else, Dan Graham, who I work with. So we're sort of adjusting to this new thing of it coming back. And as a result, I'm still kind of in the point where the thing I feel I spend the least time thinking about is the actual performance aspect, because you're dealing with acts and admin and we're in a new venue and the sort of tech and stuff. So invariably, it's all of that. And then I spend like the last couple of minutes before I step onto stage thinking, what am I actually going to say tonight? Which is not the ideal scenario, really, for stress levels and stuff, which is why, like I said about that particular performance of the show, because all this crap went wrong just before. And it just happened Dan was away for that one. So I was sort of doing that bit on my own. Yeah, that was a horrible experience because it's a show that's really important to me. The show, for people who didn't hear it, a show about my dad who died 5 years ago, and coming to terms with that, and also with breaking contact with my mum, who is a difficult personality, shall we say. And this particular venue, so where we are in Hitchin, every player in that show had been in that theatre at some point. So my dad had been there a number of times, and, my mum had as well. And so I was on the same bill with Arthur Smith, who was the headliner of that particular one that we booked, who's obviously, a bit of a legend, a really lovely guy. But yeah, so I was doing all the admin and stuff, and because this tech stuff happened, it threw me. And, but then, so because it was going badly for me, I mean, for the most part, like, I spoke to my wife afterwards. I mean, she obviously knows me very well and knows normally when I'm, not enjoying it. And she didn't really know that I wasn't. But on stage, I felt kind of trapped because it was this hour of doing this thing that's important to me, knowing I'm kind of telling the story wrong, and also going, because it was important to me, because of all the people having been there and people who knew my dad and stuff, and it being the last one, it was just this, horrible situation of not feeling it's going well, and also being like, well, I can't stop this. I've got to do the whole hour because that's the sort of nature of this particular show. I was doing the first half, Arthur was doing the second. So yeah, that, and also it's a Christmas gig. So when it's a Christmas gig, people have come who probably don't normally come to the club, all those sort of things. So you have people who probably not read the information, haven't seen that I'm doing a show about death and the rest of it. So yeah, it just felt like, and it wasn't as bad as this, but like an exercise in confusing and disappointing people in a place that mattered to me, and you know what it's like. Sometimes when it's like that, you can make things like that be the sort of final judgment on you. Do you know what I mean? When it's going badly, it's because, you know what I mean? But I've been found out, sort of thing. And really, it was just, there was too much pressure on me anyway because of all the admin stuff and the tech stuff. And that would have thrown anyone, you know what I mean? 5 minutes before, Also, I had some really nice messages. So amongst the people that didn't get it, I had like a really lovely message from a guy who sort of said, I can't remember exactly how he worded it, but like, that it was sort of gripping and, and it really resonated with him. And, and that it's the thing, you want to tell the story, you want to connect with those people, and, it's a sort of to and fro. And when you don't feel like that's coming across, it's really, it's a very isolating and lonely position to be in,
100%. And that's your talk. And I couldn't help but think that your harshest critic is you.
Yeah. Me, probably second to my mum. And the mum that plays in my head, which has been a thing since like So there's breaking contact because of this sort of narcissistic abuse thing. That has eternally been, sadly, the judgment in my head, because you're so used to, like, with that sort of person, you're disappointed them every turn, and often you can't predict what the disappointment will be. It can really throw you and jar because, like, that's the sort of nature of it. You can never please. So while it is still like you say, your harshest critic is you, I'm still coming to terms with adjusting the voice in my head, not just the voice of me, but the voice of, like, my mum's judgment. When at this stage and now, she's not in my life, but it can still impact it. And so that, yes. And so again, you're talking about your dad, you're talking about in the show, you're talking about things you never thought you would talk about. Like, for example, what happened with breaking with my mum. And so in that environment, again, it's just like, oh, look, there, without bigging it up as in what she is, at that moment, everyone in that room could have been like 270 of my mums, if you know what I mean. Which is but then you look at it and you go, well, if that's the way your life with them always was, to make you feel like that, this is more the reason why you're not in contact with them now.
Yes. Can I ask, the first time we met, after our session, it really resonated with me, the impact of your relationship with your mum.
Right. Yeah.
That really, really resonated with me. But prior to that, I reflected on the session, and it did feel dark because it was heavy subject matter, and you brought me into your space of how it was. You brought me into your space of your childhood, etc. There were so many little things that are still registering with me coming up now. And I'm wondering, when we talk about our past, when we talk about our histories, our stories, how was it for you after the recording, looking back and saying, wow, have I just really opened up about this?
So with the show, I knew I was opening up about these things more than I ever had done. But that was in theatres and on the Edinburgh Fringe, in a room where there might be 50 people or whatever, but not in a place that could be available to people who I would maybe prefer didn't listen. The obvious person being who the obvious person is. And so in the lead up to Edinburgh and in promoting it, I got more and more sort of dipping my toe into saying more in places like doing the press and stuff for it, But yeah, that conversation, I've talked about it a bit on podcasts, but maybe not in so much detail. And so there was that moment afterwards of a bit of fear. Oh God, have I said too much? And again, if you've got this internal monologue of this figure that, your unhelpful mum that you always are disappointing, that's compounding that. And so then, I think I sent a message to your producer Tim and said, obviously I expected to sort of hear it beforehand, but maybe I said too much. It'd be good to hear through it. But really not wanting to edit it, because the whole point is that I want it to be true to what it was, and it would be, we're having a conversation for like an hour. You don't want to take out the content that makes sense of it. And so then in the end, when I did hear it, I was like, no, actually it's okay. There's nothing. I was okay with it going out there. I still got that thing of because the thing is, when you deal with these sorts of personalities, and it's a bit frustrating, I find myself talking about it again because it takes up so much of your time, or can do. But
effectively, you were talking about, being open, being transparent. For me, I'm going to use the word vulnerable.
Yeah.
You enabled yourself to feel vulnerable in that setting.
When you're dealing with the detachment that came after I had to break contact with all the stuff going on with my dad's will and the rest of it, everything you're doing, it seems, is causing more crisis, because the things that are coming out of that other camp are so horrific, and these are things I said about before, getting a letter from the solicitor saying that the reason I was questioning the things that were going on was because my mum was gay. when that had always, I mean, it's not for me to assume what she actually thinks she even is in that sense, but I had supported her as the child that was kind of her confidant. I shouldn't have been in that role, but there I was. And so you're like, God, how can this be happening? That's the things I told you about before, like going to their secret wedding and stuff just to try and appease.
Absolutely.
You just go, God, and so everything we were doing or saying, and we were just trying to get through it. These things would just suddenly come. You would get horrible messages about you. They call it with the narcissism thing, flying monkeys. So like the Wizard of Oz, on the other side, obviously I have to be painted in the worst possible light to make sense of this thing that's happening. And they sort of use those people to go out and sort of send out feelers, but also put you in a position. And I get things like, I did a thing like promoting one of the shows, and a person who'd been one of my mum's friends and also my dad's friend said in response to something I said, I think it's something like he said, 'cause I'm doing this show about, a year ago I did this show about my dad. We're a year on, he's still dead.
Wow.
But and just sort of making a joke out of it. And the response I got was, "That's a bit insensitive, David," was a comment, and it was from this person. And you're like, you go, this is my dad. And so in the end, I sent her a message, this person, and said, look, I know that you're my mum's friend, and I get that. And so I don't want to step in that place. I don't want to take away from that. But you are being told her side of the story, not mine. If you want to hear mine, I will tell you. But at the same time, because it's just so nonsensical. Because you go, the idea that the child would be the one that my mum was having all these affairs and stuff, and all that, and I was keeping the secrets for her, and this idea that me just trying to do what I was trying to do was like, do you know what I mean? My mum and dad were divorced. They've been divorced for many years. Why would if the child is saying this stuff, it's more likely that the child is the one that's been through the ringer. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Been affected and impacted by it all. How did you feel when you did listen to the pre-recording, as it were, before it went live?
So the sort of, I suppose, work-based critical bit of me went, no, that's all right. I mean, obviously you pardon yourself anyway in what you say, but it's, as I say, as I've got bolder in releasing myself from this like hold that I've been put under with this, you start going, well, at this stage, well, I'm just saying it in my environment. And I have done this. So like, I've not shared the episode about so much, which is frustrating for me. And also I feel like for you, I don't want to be hiding it, but I'm also like, because the drama that these things cause, you try and mitigate it, But yeah. And like I was going to say, like, so with this stuff that's going on before, where these crises were coming out of nowhere, I had messages from my mum's partner under a pseudonym, like, it was. I posted some joke. This is so ridiculous. About this was post COVID or during the midst of COVID. They were just sort of starting to ease restrictions, and there was an article somewhere, and it said, so now it's safe to hug your family or something like that. And I said something like, "Well, I've obviously not met my family, as a joke, as is my job, And then I got this message saying, "Oh, it was really sort of like childish as well. Like, oh, you're a fucking idiot, but you're not funny and the rest of it." And it was on Twitter. This was in response to this thing that was just me throwing something out. And I looked at the name of it, and it was the nickname that my mum's partner's sisters call her. Was this, and I was like, "Well, I know who this is." So I was like, "Well," so I responded briefly and said along the lines of, I know who this is. And the very fact is, so when I was a kid and all this stuff was going on that I told you about before, I was frightened in my own home. I didn't feel safe in my own home,
I still remember, I've still got that image of you in your bedroom.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I used to, that's it. I used to put things by my door as a warning. As I say, I want to be clear, no one touched me, I'm going
to say something now. That's horrific. It's horrific. That image is etched in my brain And viscerally, I can actually feel that fear.
And I can be honest enough as to say that carried on as an adult. When I used to live on my own for quite some time, I would still, when I went to bed, put things in front of my door because it was so ingrained. And so in years later, when we were again in this battle, my mum had said in response to that, well, why were you doing that? I'd never hurt you. Why were you putting things in front of your door? And it's like, I think you can't blame me as the child for doing what I needed to do to feel safe. I think the issue is what was going on outside that door that was making me afraid, And
100%.
And so in response to this tweet thing, I ended up saying, you made the things that went on in my childhood, you made me feel suicidal as a child. You're pressing me again now to go, And so I'd never said that to that person before, And these are all little steps. And it was just in a horrific scenario. The fact that we were having this, what I mean, the sort of crisis that would come left, right, and centre. So now that's what I mean. As we had the chat, there was that thing of, oh God, I've done another thing that might cause a kickback. But then you go, but we are apart now, and I'm in my own space, and this is what I do. This is my job, and this is my thing. If the people on the other side hadn't realised that I would talk about my life, they've not been paying attention to what I do. But until it all hit up and, we had to break contact. And with these people, you do have to break contact because they just bring chaos and pain. And, I was still, even at a sort of safe distance, metaphorically, even when I stopped actually putting things in front of my door, which, as I say, went on much further than it really should have done into my adult years. I was still like doing that in all the things I was doing to try and buffer and protect. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if what I'm saying is making you angry or unhappy or you can't deal with it, there's a lot of internet that isn't me. Do you know what I mean? Turn the other way.
Yes.
Yeah, when you've had a childhood that was continuously built on this sort of dynamic of you not really being an individual person, you were just it's very hard to put it, but you know what I mean? It was all about her life, their relationship. It wasn't about me as a child. The lies were all about, I was involved in the telling the lies rather than going, what is this doing to that kid there, this only child,
Can I ask how is your safe space now as an adult?
It's better than it was. A heck of a lot better than it was. I every so often try to note the improvement because you know what it's like. You only look at the negative.
Yes.
So like a trigger, as it inevitably would be, is my dad's grave is just like a couple of minutes walk from where I live now, my dad's old house. And so I've not seen my mum for 5 years. But every so often you go to the grave and it's obvious that she's been there because she's left, a plant or something. And that's fine. She's perfectly entitled to do that. They do always line up. Well, sometimes it'll be like on their wedding anniversary, knowing that she also got married secretly and didn't tell my dad. Or it'll be, so
what's going on with you when you bear witness to all of this?
Well, at first, and in the first few years, it's horrendous because you go, part of me goes, well, of course my life with my mum would end up with us communicating through me seeing her being at my dad's grave, and that's it. You know what I mean? Of course, because that's just the nature of this whole dynamic. And I said before, she walked off from my dad's burial seconds after I put the ashes in the grave. She was gone, leaving the rest of us there. But these people, the people like that, they want to trigger you. They want, because it gives them oxygen, sadly, with sort of narcissists, and they want you to react. And again, like the things I was doing, so like this, me talking to you, this could be used as a tool for them to show, my mum to show people around, look, he's saying all this. How could he say all this stuff? And that's what I'm doing now is as a result of the being provoked, if you like. I wouldn't have done this if they hadn't put me in a situation, but they put me in a situation. And so now the sort of the brakes are off. I don't have to, and again, I'm not trying to cause them problems, her problems, but
you're not answerable to anybody now.
No, exactly. And but that's a hard thing to get to really sink in and have you believe, because you can go on in practice or in theory, yeah, that's true, but for yourself, how you feel in your heart, you feel like you're going against what feels natural because you spent your entire life doing it another way. But then you get more comfortable with it, and that's what I'm saying, really. So a few years into that, okay, there she's been. Okay, she's been here. Oh, it's not triggering me as much as it would. And you go, so that's improvement. And because even down to that, I'm not saying it's entirely this, and again, this could be edited and used against me, but it doesn't matter. I could, some of that leaving a thing there, of course it's for my dad. My mum loves my dad, but people with that sort of materialistic mindset, they couldn't just go there without a thing to leave, because you've got to illustrate that you've been grieving. She needs me to know that she's been there, that she's still, and the idea that you go, so she doesn't live in this area. She comes so close to where I live, but only to leave a thing on the dead person's grave and go, not to try and protect or fix the thing with the one that's still alive,
On that note, if she wanted to come and fix things, would you give her the space?
So I've had a lot of advice from a therapist that specializes in narcissistic abuse. I've read into it a lot.
Okay, I'm not gonna, pour water on what the therapist's advice is, but what does your gut tell you? How would you be? What would you like to do?
I think I have to know that closure that you would like to have. I have to find that for myself outside of that. And obviously the thing is, if she was, and I want to be careful what I say because I put it out there, but, sometimes I think, well, when my mum dies, how will I know? How will I find out? What will be the way? Knowing the way these things work and the way that I have to be the villain for that side to work, you know what I mean? For her to justify the things she's done and the rest of it means that I'll find out in the worst way. I would love, so I suppose in the longest possible way to answer the question, of course, I would love to see my mum again in many, many ways. Despite all the chaos, of course, I still miss her. But what I'm missing is the mum that I didn't have.
Absolutely, 100%. For me, this is just me and you talking. I get that 100%. I get that 100%.
Yeah.
And this is not devilment on my part, but what flashed through my mind was the way that you'd find out is she'd be buried beside your dad, something like that,
Yeah. Yeah, it will be the most hurtful way. I would, it is mad in my mind in many ways that my mum is still alive and has been, it's been 5 years or whatever since my dad died, and I've not seen her. But then I go, but she comes this close to, where I live and all the things that we went to. And there's no sense of any of that. When my wife, during those crisis times, said, this is bleak. Enjoy listening to this podcast, people. But
enjoy it indeed.
Yeah, watch something nice afterwards. So, not that this isn't nice, but my wife said, so when all that was going on, she said, I'm hiding the razor blades in our house because I'm worried about David. And you are pushing and you are pushing. If you care, please stop pushing. This is where we are. And it didn't stop. It didn't stop. Because that would be perceived in her mind as, how can you say that to me? How can, it's the person that says, like I said to you about putting things by the door, with this thing saying to me, why did you think I'd hurt you? What were you afraid of? I never hurt you. And it's like, you did. And then you said things like that to make me as the brain go, that's at odds with what's happening. Of course, she cares about me, but where's the evidence? And the evidence isn't there. So if it takes, and I'd said similar things to her as well. She knew my mental health history. But she was never prepared to acknowledge for herself, because the world would fall apart, that she played such a big part in creating that. She was supposed to be the protector. She did in the best way she could. I'm sure it's at odds with her. I'm sure she loves me in her way. But she'll keep doing fucking horrible things.
Absolutely. And you know what? She loves you in her way. And it just reminded me of the Philip Larkin poem, This Be the Verse, which begins, they fuck you up, your mum and dad. They may not mean to, but they do. Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah. With my dad, there were plenty of things that, because we're all human, plenty of times where those things would happen, when I would hurt him, when he would hurt me. But the overbearing thing was love. And we knew where we were. We knew where we were at the end, whereas my mum, I tell you, one of the harder things about the whole thing is if you look at it like a sort of chronological story, you go, any of the nice moments, any of the things when I was growing up with my mum that weren't like that, they were ultimately heading to this. So, the bits that you miss and stuff, you go, but my mum experienced all the things that I experienced of our relationship too, but she was older than me. She was the adult when I was born, obviously. So she's the one that should come from the point of view of the maturity.
Yes. Instead, I get the sense of indignation. Yeah. How dare he?
Yeah, endless. And that is... So I don't know if I told you about this last time, but it's a good example. My first solo show I did, I don't think I told you about this, in the Brighton Fringe. There was a particular day, I think I told you a bit about it on the first day. We had a really big comedy press guy in and an agent in, all this stuff. And so it was in a little pub in Brighton. And this was the first time I'd done stand-up on my own, so it was more personal than the stuff I'd done as a double act. And so I said to my mum, who decided she wanted to come to Brighton that day, I said, just could you not come that day? And, explosion, absolute explosion. She was hanging up on me, how dare, and I was like, well, look, come to Brighton, but don't come up into just that room, because it's a time I can't have in my mind. I'm trying to do the show that I've been writing for this amount of time, that I've invested in with an agent and a press in. And if my mum's there, it changes the energy, because in stand-up, you can't not acknowledge it.
Yes.
And as I say, she was hanging up. She was, I said, come any other day. I'd love you to be there, but just please this. And she never, because the thing that my dad said about her when we were right at the end, when he said she never forgives, he didn't mean it in like a big dramatic, horrible way. He just meant that if there's something that's happened, it ultimately is always there. Time might mean that you're no longer having the to and fro of the argument, but my God, has she not forgiven you? Ever. And it will come back whenever it needs to. So in her world, I'd been in therapy then. I'd really been working on this without knowing the sort of narcissist bit. But I was trying to explain to her, I said, look, please just let me say to you, what this means. Let me try and explain to you why I'm saying just don't come this day into that room for that hour. Be there, be in the pub downstairs. We can have a lovely day. We can do all those things just for that hour, please. I can't control when this press and this person comes. It's going to matter for me. And there was that was not a possible thing. And then you're going, because I'm used to my mum's behaviour. You go, I can't control this. Even though it's my thing, she could still come. She's still going to come. I have no control. What do I do? And that's the sort of thing I mean when you go, wasn't even a thing about her. And to link to that. So there was one time, being a professional actor, and I've toured around the country and stuff and been lucky to do those sort of things. But I've only played the theatre in Stevenage, where I grew up, the Gordon Craig, other than there's a concert hall, once professionally. And that was where I saw my first panto, which basically made me want to be a performer. All I wanted was to be on that stage. And it was just this one show, and it was the thing where I was just in the band, and I was a dep. So I'd had no rehearsal. I was playing 2 hours worth of music that I'd had to basically notate myself with one go at it. And so I'd said to my mum and dad, don't come to this one. There's no point. I'm trying to remember what I'm doing. They just don't need an audience for this. But, it's annoying. It's in Stevenage, it's where I grew up, And so years later, when we have another conversation, so she came. She came with my dad. She was there. My dad would have been less part of the conversation. I come out into the bar and they're there. And she said to me when we were having an argument years later, I'd totally forgotten this thing. But she said, the way you looked to me, you were so angry that I was there. And I said, yeah, but because I told you not to come. So I wouldn't have blanked you, but when I've gone, please don't come, and I find out you have, it. And also, so she got in her head so I toured with the Buddy Holly show I did for quite a long while. I was playing Buddy Holly in it.
I remember you saying, yes.
Yeah. So in her mind, she conflated it, and she was like, oh, I came to the Buddy show in Stevenage and you did that. And I was like, I never did that. If I'd played Buddy in that theatre, this would, in my local town, I've been like, come, everyone come. This is a really special moment for me. I love this. This is the theatre, is the reason why I do what I do, really, in many, many ways. Come, let's do, it wasn't a new show then. It was, it's the opposite of what I was saying about that Brighton gig I was starting with.
Yes.
And also, I'd remember if I'd done it, because it was a theatre that meant so much to me. But again, this argument happened with my dad in earshot afterwards, where she was insisting it was the Buddy show, and it's like, no, because understand, this theatre is important to me, so I would remember. And that doesn't exist either, because you can't be right, even though it's your own life, and it's So I couldn't explain to her that either, and she wondered why I looked pissed off when she was there. It was because I said to her, "Don't come, please don't come." Blah blah blah. We had that, So this is the sort of shit that I eternally had to put up with.
It was funny because I was going to ask you earlier, in terms of emotions, is anger one of them that gets displayed?
And that's the thing. So if you're dealing with this sort of ludicrous, and it just keeps going and you have no control, that's what I meant about the flying monkeys thing. Anger, because you can't do it, you can't explain. And then you react. It's like reactive abuse, they say. And then I'm the one that's the abuser because I've said this terrible thing. But it's like saying to my mum's friend about, but you don't know the whole story. You know the bit that's version by her. They're only seeing that bit. After having spent a good 35 years of my life telling no one what was going on. I didn't even tell my friends. I wasn't allowed to tell my friends about what was happening at home. It was so insistent, this thing about the relationship my mum was having, that my best friend, childhood friend that I've known since, forever, and I still see, he didn't know. When we were at school together, he didn't know. It was only as adults that he found out that all the stuff that was going on at home, that my mum had this other woman there. So I had no outlet. I'd kept it all in, and even to protect my mum and dad's relationship as it was, because I didn't want to. I felt like it was my responsibility, because this is the way it sort of goes. They make it like it's your thing. It meant I protected my dad and my mum from. I didn't want to say things that would make my dad feel so bad about my mum that he wouldn't want to see her. So, Do you know what I mean? I spent all this time doing that, and then my dad died. And it was all, as far as she is, for nothing. And you go, I could have told my dad the truth. I could have said that this is what she was doing. She was manipulating and all these things. But I didn't. And now my dad's gone and I can't write it. I can't, So I spent, as I say, 35 years. It would have been obviously when I was very young. But when I was very young, it was going on then too. I was taken to these houses when I was like 4 or 5. Of other people my mum was seeing while still married with my dad, and him not knowing, because he thought, oh, they're 2 women, and in his sort of slightly more simplistic generational thing, I don't think it occurred to him for quite some time that there was more going on.
Where does shame sit in all of this? And I'm asking that because of, we hold on to things that aren't ours. And not even your best friend knew until you reached adulthood. And I'm wondering, was shame part and parcel of this as a process? And when you did open up to your best friend and to other people, did it start to dissipate? Or does it still linger a little bit now?
Yeah, it still lingers, definitely.
Has it reduced? Has it lessened?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And the being out of the fire, being out of the battle, because I've I set a boundary and none of the things I needed were met. So and having said that, I said, oh, well, this is the way it will go. I have to go away. Means that it lessens. And obviously, you've spent, I don't know, 36, 37 years doing it a certain way. And so however much you spend time working on these things, the balance of that side of like BC and AD is too far, well, not too far, but it's more on that side. So it still takes a lot of reminding. And that's what I mean about noting when you feel different, when it doesn't trigger you
so much.
My friend, I'm talking about, his name's Steve. I told him when my mum was about to get married secretly and was saying to me I mustn't tell my dad and the rest of it. This is the last few years of my dad's life. And so he had that side of it. By then I was talking about it. And he remembered how hard it was for me to come to terms with somehow not telling my dad. And while having said to mum, you've got to tell him, but also my mum's getting married somewhere. I can't not be there. It's my mum. My mum's getting married. How can I be at home when she's doing that to the person that ultimately was the person who ended up trolling me, for fuck's sake. Did I not show that despite what happened to me as a child, I was there with those two people as a witness, even though I said to my mum, this is tearing me apart that you're not telling dad. You've got to tell dad. But I did that. That's what I mean about doing things to show, not even to show. It wasn't to show that I cared, but it was part of it inbuilt. Because why would I be there if not? And still we ended up where we were, so the shame, I guess, comes in more in the sense of you feel like an idiot because you go, why did I not see all this? But I was a kid. I started as a kid.
It started off as a kid and it becomes conditioning, learned behaviors. Yeah. This is what we do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do you journal?
Not as much as I used to. Because I used to write a daily blog. I used to do that sort of, in public and stuff. And I did write about a lot of these things while not saying about that for quite a while. And I've stopped doing it lately. And I know it doesn't need to be public. You don't need to write for it to be public. But partly because I knew that my mum would still be reading it. And you go, I don't want you to know my life. Unfortunately, there's parts of me as a performer that means I can't just disappear as I would like from her view. She can go whenever she wants to top up the anger or the frustrated me. I'll just go on there and have a look at this, and it'll make me feel terrible because I'll read it all and be angry again.
Yes.
Whereas
which goes back to the thing I said about, if it is triggering you, don't go into my corner. This is my corner. This was always my corner. But so yeah, I sort of started to stop. Doing that so much because I didn't want it to be read by someone who didn't really have a right to have that inroad into my life anymore. Because when you take photos of, you post photos, say, on Instagram or whatever, you crop it more than you might normally because you don't want your mum and them to see where you are because you don't want, this is how ridiculous it is. You don't want to give any information.
It's not ridiculous. I think I have many clients who have a dual relationship, as it were, with those who they see as family, and it doesn't necessarily have to be kin. It doesn't have to be blood relatives, but people that they feel safe and protected by, as opposed to blood relations.
Yeah. And as we've sort of said, my family, as regards that side, my mum, was correct, put me in a situation where I was putting things in front of my door as a protection. So it's a very good illustration of the blood relative is not necessarily truly your family. They're not necessarily truly there for you. For most, hopefully, but not all. But my dad was, despite any of the frustrations and the times, was on my side. And my friends that are my close friends and my wife, she's both literally and also, like soul-wise, she's my family. And it's so crazy that even the way this whole thing works, I imagine my mum would be triggered by me saying my wife is my family, even though she's my family. you know.
She is your family, 100%.
But she protected. But the thing I told you about the razor blades, she was protecting me. She was my savior, fighting with this fucking terrible, horrible beast of a thing to protect me, to fight for the corner that I did, the protection I didn't have when I was a kid. And my friends have done that too. And yeah, they're your family. And it makes me sad that, because I had such a small actual family, that my mum is still nearby, but I can't see her, I can't be with her. But it's also for her protection too, because she can't control how she's going to react.
In the past, I'm assuming, well, we know you've discussed this about the protection that you received of your wife, of your friends, etc. Do they need to protect you as much nowadays?
Not as much. It's still difficult, particularly for my wife and me, because she's dealing with a person who was raised in this way and who suffers a lot with depression and all those things, and has had to reevaluate his life more than once because he did a load of therapy while trying to come to terms with the fact that, his mum was really, why was all this stuff happening when I was a kid, but obviously she still cares about me, and then had to reevaluate it when, she realized that, actually, no, I used to think my mum's partner was the sort of instigator, the one to be scared of. I've since learned, no, I mean, she was, tactless for a child, when there's a child there and how she behaved, but she also didn't really owe me anything. My mum did, so my mum was the one I was protecting myself from, sadly. And I still am. To have to hold that all in and try and be like a referee on these two people, my family, as a child, and with no real time for yourself, while not having anyone you could talk to, that takes a hell of a toll. And then losing your dad, obviously, like losing someone you love, takes a hell of a toll, and the toll doesn't go away. But you learn within that, well, no, that's not fair. It doesn't go away. It just changes. It changes.
Okay. So on that change, do you have conversations with your life in terms of how things have changed? I mean, for me, one of the questions ultimately I was going to lead on to was about love, affection, appreciation, compassion, feeling safe.
Yeah.
They're there now more than they've ever been in your life. And I'm wondering, because you've had to go through the storm, you've battled through the storm, you haven't battled through this alone.
No.
Your wife's been there at your side.
Absolutely. But I think she finds it frustrating and hard that she knows for many years, until we were together, or, particularly when I was a child, there was no one batting for me, not in the same way. I tell you, this is probably an important thing to say. You're like saying about the, would you want to see her again? Would you want to resolve things? So I'll go on record and say, I love my mum. I do love her, and I want her to be okay. And I'm sad that we can't do that together. But I still love her. And when anything happens to her, I will be broken, in many, many ways. I'll be more broken by the fact that in the years that intervened, when we could have been together, when she could have been a part of my life now with my wife and my dog and all the nice things, she could be coming back to this house that meant something to all of us because, my dad grew up here. But the way that she behaves means that can't happen. And having set a boundary, you have to maintain that boundary, because if you don't, it means nothing. And like I said to you about those shows where I said, please don't come. You're not going to come, are you?
Yeah.
You go,
right. So this the way this goes. So I love her, but part of that love is staying away and going, that won't change. I won't, as in I will always love her. And I hope she loves me in her own way. But it's not a safe place to go back to. So it's best just to leave it at that.
100%. It's funny. I mean, I can still recall my relationship with my dad wasn't good at all, not at all. However, I still remember when I started senior school, he was the person that I wanted to see. He was the person that I wanted to open the door of my home on my first day back to ask me, Yinka, how was school today?
Yeah.
In fact, I'll go as far as to say, when I lost my virginity, if you can say such a thing, he was the person I wanted to have a conversation with.
Yeah.
And I didn't.
Mm.
So yeah, I get it.
But I will still have that conversation in my head with those people. But I do have to come to terms with, like I say, all the nice things you go, but they will end here. So should I trust any of that stuff? But then I go in her own way, in the same way that she's not just going to that grave for me. She loves my dad, but that love goes with a lifetime of manipulation and
conditions.
Yeah, exactly. Big conditions and rules that are endless and complicated and chaotic and get worse and worse and worse with age. So having spent 35 years or whatever in that chaos and then trying to protect and maintain it as it was separating, that's enough. I'll still have the bit in my head where I still struggle with that, that I can't see her, that all of it, but I have to be cautious. I have to protect myself now and my wife and all the rest of it. And part of that is, as I say, to say on record, if she wanted to hear it, I do love her. I do love her and I do miss her.
Since the podcast, as it were, what nice things have you immersed yourself in? What's changed or what's different for you?
I'm still very hard on myself and I still don't spend enough time doing things, nicer things, being kinder to myself, about spending more time with my family. So I should be doing more.
Self-compassion. What does that look like? If you were the most self-compassionate individual to yourself that you can think of, how would that look? What would it entail? What things would you do? Not solely with your family, but for yourself.
That's a difficult one. In a very simple sense, be kinder to yourself. Be kinder to yourself for the things that you went through. Be kinder to yourself for when you've reacted as you didn't want to react. Be kind to yourself in as much as you can when you feel you have absolutely let the side down. Because we all make mistakes. And it's a complex thing, but try as much as possible to take time and be kind to yourself and to not always be on. You don't always have to be busy. I'm someone that feels that if I'm not busy, I'm not good at days off. I just don't get, because I feel like I should be doing more or whatever. But learning that you don't have to do so much, so you don't have to be visible some days. And I'm getting better at that, I think, but I could still do more. And also, you said about the shame thing, being kind to yourself for how you approached all of that. You won't have always got it right, but you did. I know that I did fucking well when I look at it and think about, do you know what I mean? What I went through. Yeah.
I'm glad you said that. I'm so glad you said that. Would you ever revisit therapy again?
I still am. I'm still seeing therapists, more specifically to do with this toxic relationship thing, ending that. But also, you need time away from the self-reflection sometimes. And so it's a balance, isn't it?
So what comes to mind then? Something mindless?
I used to watch a lot more episodes of Diagnosis Murder than any healthy man truly should.
And make reference to it.
Excellent.
So that's an example.
That's a great example.
I've seen every episode. I've seen every episode more than once. And that's concerning in of itself.
And
wow.
That's probably a sign that I do need some sort of therapy.
Well, you got a wow off me anyway. You know, that's not without judgment, but you still got the wow. I'm gonna ask you this one again. We asked last time. I'm intrigued now. Who is the most important person in your life?
Now, don't forget, I've also listened to a number of your episodes since we've talked.
I don't mean
Well, I know you're going to give me your honest answer.
It's still my wife at the moment, and at the moment.
So where are you then on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 being yes, I'm the most important, but I know you're not going to say 10. What number would you give yourself?
At the moment, it's probably about a 4 or a 5. But like about the thing about noting the difference.
Yes,
that is a hell of a lot different to what it would have been a number of years ago or whatever. I know and expect that it's always going to be like a needle, like moving around.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Excellent.
But yeah, it's your life's work, isn't it? To try and do that.
You know what? You're not wrong there. And we don't always get it right.
No.
But if the intentions are positive, then all we can do is just try.
That's it. Me going to my mum's wedding, that was me trying to do the right thing despite all of it. And I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't change it knowing what I know now. I would have still gone.
Of course you would have.
That's me. So, like you said about saying I love my mum, that was me showing my love for her and saying, if this is what you want, I support you. So I was still there, even if all the shit that followed, even if we can't see each other now, I was still there and I still did the best I could. So for all the things that might frustrate, all the things that make her angry about me, maybe she should spend some time remembering those moments or the rest of it. And if she can't, it's not my problem.
It's not your problem. David, you've been a wonderful guest today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I didn't know where we were going to go today.
Neither did I.
This was deep.
Yeah.
This was needed, but I really appreciate it. And I'm sure our listeners will too.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Cheers. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Hurt Locker. Please give us a rating or share with another listener. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Hurt Locker Pod.